English step by step. Past perfect continuous, step 1. Click like if you'd like to see more videos like this. Click subscribe if you'd like to see my other videos. And you can request a lesson in the comments below. So this video is about past perfect continuous. Before you watch this one, it might be a good idea to watch my videos on past perfect simple and also present perfect continuous, because a lot of the rules, a lot of the patterns are similar. So, when do we use past perfect continuous? Well, we use this tense to talk about an action which continued for a period of time before another action in the past. So, this is a continuous tense. It's like present continuous, past continuous, present perfect continuous. So now we have past perfect continuous. So we're thinking about an action which continued for a period of time before another action in the past. Now we also use this tense when we want to focus on the duration of an activity. The duration means how long it continued. So that is the focus when we use this tense. Let's look at some examples. Example number 1. The garden was completely white. Why? It had been snowing during the night. Example number 2. We can also use the question why. The children were covered in mud. Why? They had been playing in the garden. Example 3. Bob had enough money to buy a car. Why? He had been saving for 3 years. So the first sentence is talking about the result, and the second sentence is talking about the activity which led to this result. And the duration of the activity is 3 years. Number 4. Tom didn't have enough money. Now this example is negative. Why did he not have enough money? He hadn't been saving. Example number 5. Susan had sore eyes. Why did she have sore eyes? She had been working on the computer all day. So there we have the duration, all day. Example number 6. He had a suntan. Why? He had been lying on the beach all week. Example number 7. The police stopped his car. Why? He hadn't been paying attention to the speed limit. The next two examples have the past perfect continuous in the first part of one sentence. 8. They had been playing tennis for about half an hour when the rain started. So you can make many sentences like this. For example, they had been having a picnic for about half an hour when the rain started. Or they had been walking in the countryside for half an hour when the rain started. So it's typical to have one sentence with past simple and also past perfect continuous. Example number 9 here. We had been waiting for more than half an hour when the plane eventually arrived. So we had been waiting. You can use this as the beginning of many sentences. For example, we had been waiting for more than half an hour when the doctor arrived. We had been waiting for more than half an hour when the rain started again. So those are all examples with past perfect continuous. So we often use the past perfect continuous when we tell a story, along with past perfect simple, or past continuous. So we can use them in the same sentence. Well, here are some examples. When we woke up in the morning, we discovered that it had been snowing during the night. So the sentence has two parts, and one part is really talking about the past of the past. Example number 2. The children had been playing in the garden, so they were covered in mud. So here we have the first part of the sentence with one situation and the second part is the result of the situation in the past. Number 3. Bob could now afford a car because he had been saving for 3 years. So we have the result in the first part of the sentence. We can see that the past perfect continuous is the past of the present perfect continuous. In other words, had been doing is the past of have been doing. In past perfect continuous, the auxiliary verbs are always had and been. So it's had been. For all the subjects, I had been, you had been, he had been, they had been, it always had been. So the structure is quite simple. Examples. I've been writing a letter is the present perfect continuous, changes to I'd been writing a letter, past perfect continuous. Has he been working? Had he been working? It hasn't been raining, it hadn't been raining. They've been watching the film, they'd been watching the film. Let's look at the form of the past perfect continuous, the form and the structure. To use the past perfect continuous, we need the following. The auxiliary verbs, or helping verbs, had been. So, always had been. For example, I had been working, you had been working, he had been working, they had been working. So singular is had been working, and plural had been working. It doesn't change, so the structure is quite easy because it doesn't change. And we also need the present participle of the main verb. For example, write. Present participle had been writing. Travel. Present participle had been travelling. Study had been studying. Watch had been watching. Now you can see there are some spelling changes you have to think about for the present participle. For example, write, you drop the E to make writing. Travel, you double the L to make travelling. And other spelling changes like this. Now you can watch my videos and my video series on the present perfect continuous for details about these spelling changes, because the rules are the same for the present perfect continuous and for the past perfect continuous. So the auxiliary verbs are always had been. Now note that we often use contractions in spoken English and informal written English. Here are some examples of affirmative or positive sentences. You had been working in London, so we have the contraction you'd. You'd been working in London. He had been skiing, contraction, he'd been skiing. She had been spending too much money, she'd been spending too much money. Now, sometimes it's difficult to hear the auxiliary verb because you have the contraction. When you're speaking quickly, often you don't pronounce the word or one word in the contraction. So make sure when you're writing that you include all the two auxiliary verbs. It has been raining, it had been raining. We had been planning, we'd been planning. They had been waiting, they'd been waiting. So, pronounce the contractions and remember to write both of the two auxiliary verbs in the contraction. We also have contractions in the negative sentences with past perfect continuous. For example, I had not been drinking, I hadn't been drinking. You had not been looking, you hadn't been looking. She had not been thinking, she hadn't been thinking. We had not been expecting it, we hadn't been expecting it. They had not been looking forward to it, they hadn't been looking forward to it. So now let's look at questions in the past perfect continuous tense. Again, we use inversion, like present perfect continuous. Have I? You have? Have you? He has. Has he? She has. Has he? Now in this case, we only have the auxiliary verb had. so this doesn't change in the inversion. For example, you had been drinking too much. Question form, had you been drinking too much? She had been learning English. Had she been learning English? It had been raining all week. Had it been raining all week? And again, had you been expecting this? Had they been sleeping a lot? And then we have questions with the question words, what, who, when, how, where. In these examples, I had been eating healthy food. What had you been eating? I had been waiting at the bus stop. Where had you been waiting? I had been talking to them. Who had you been talking to? So remember the inversions. So that brings us to the end of this Step 1 video on the past perfect continuous. So now you can move on to the Step 2 video to try some practice exercises. Remember, click like, subscribe, or you can request a lesson.